Welcome to Storytimer at Large. Carolyn Lee Owens Brady was almost 34 in September of 1970. She lived at 430 Dory Lynn Lane in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She was divorced and the mother of 3 children, John Allen Fracaro, Natalie, now Natalie Heron, and Stephen Charles Brady. On Monday, September 20th, 1970, Carolyn was reported missing from Kendallville, Indiana. Carolyn Lee Owens was born on September 23, 1937 in Kendallville to Virginia Easterday Owens and George Owens. Kendallville is northwest of Fort Wayne. I haven't been able to find the dates of her 2 marriages, but we do know that she had been married to Richard John Fracaro and divorced, and we also know that she had been married to Charles Brady of Kendallville and that they were in the process of divorcing. We know that she was living in Joliet, Illinois in 1957 when her son John Allen Fracaro was born. But there isn't much in the news about Carolyn's life again until September 23, 1970. Carolyn was found on the Monon Railroad tracks near Indiana Dunes Park, about a mile north of Westville, Indiana, on September 23, 1970. She was spotted there on the tracks in the early morning by a school bus driver. Concerned for the situation, the bus driver removed her body from the tracks before going to a phone and calling the police. Carolyn's body was transported to the hospital on E Street in LaPorte, Indiana. She was described as 5'4" and 110 pounds, so she was petite. One relatively strong man could have placed her on those railroad tracks without needing an accomplice. Indiana Dunes is a national park now, but it was just a state park in 1970. If it had been a national park, the FBI would have been involved in her death investigation because her murder would have happened on federal property. Carolyn Brady had been beaten and shot in the left side of the head with a .38 caliber weapon. The Kendallville News-Sun reported that it was a .32 caliber weapon, but we'll go with .38. Her head had been wrapped in a blanket, which was soaked with blood. It had rained in the night, and she was still wet. Her body had been placed on the tracks with her head positioned on the rail. Both of her eyes were blackened. She was wearing a brown turtleneck sweater and red pants. She had on what appeared to be an engagement ring. Her gold wristwatch was found nearby. Police theorized that her killer had tried to cover up the murder, hoping for a train to come along to make her death look accidental. But her head might have been placed there by a killer who also wished to utterly destroy her head and face out of anger and spite. There are many ways to dispose of a body. Burial, rivers, lakes, streams, even the ever-present Lake Michigan are all options. But Carolyn's killer chose this method. I think that this shows a high level of anger and vindictive behavior. The wrapping of her head with a blanket seems to indicate that the killer knew her and did not want to view her face. The killer could have been concerned about containing the blood and potential mess. Also, that might be another reason to wrap her head in a blanket. Perhaps Carolyn had already been beaten before. Maybe she's just been beaten unconscious and her killer decided to wrap the blanket around her head before shooting her. The level of violence, though, seems to indicate to me that the killer was very close to the victim. This is overkill. The fact that her jewelry was not taken would seem to rule out robbery as a motive. It also makes me think that the new fiancé might not be responsible. I feel like an angry fiancé might take back the ring he had given her, but I don't think he would have that much anger to do something like that. After her discovery on Wednesday the 23rd, she went unidentified until a police officer from the Indiana Dunes area happened to be traveling to Fort Wayne and heard on the radio about Carolyn Brady being a missing person. He contacted police in Fort Wayne, who were able to reach Carolyn's sister, Rose Harley. Rose then traveled to Westville and identified her sister's body. That was a lucky thing, because so many times you hear of a body being identified that's been a doe for a long time, many decades, and then finally they're identified, and they weren't actually that far away from their home. It's something you see sometimes. Carolyn's death certificate estimated that she had been killed on Tuesday, September 22nd, 1970. Not much is reported about the investigation. Was her ex-husband Charles Brady questioned? Was Carolyn dating anyone? We don't know. She may have been, she had a ring on that looked like an engagement ring, but we don't actually know. After Carolyn's obituary, I couldn't find any other mention of her name in the newspapers. At the time of her murder, she was in the process of divorcing Charles Brady, the owner of Chuck's Tavern in Kendallville. The engagement ring that she wore was maybe one from a new fiancé. Who was that new fellow? Or Carolyn could have also been wearing the ring just to wear a ring. Sometimes you just wear jewelry, especially in the 60s. Cocktail rings were a big deal. It was reported by the Kendallville News-Sun that Carolyn had recently been living alone in a small apartment. Her daughter, Natalie, was staying with Carolyn's mother at 411.5 State Street. Who killed Carolyn? Who was questioned? Was any evidence preserved in her case? Can anything still be tested today? Charles R. Brady, the man Carolyn was divorcing, he died in October of 1989 at the age of 75. He would have been only 57, though, in 1970 at the time of Carolyn's murder and their impending divorce. Carolyn Lee Owens Brady should have had a long life. She should have been around to see her children grow up. She should have at least gotten some justice. We can at least remember her, and we can only hope that she rests in peace. Rest in peace, Carolyn.